What is happening, everybody? TC here with Smoky Mountain Knife Works, smkw.com. Today, another episode of Knife History with TC. And today, we're talking about that USMC fighting knife. Let's light it up. So yes, today we are talking about the illustrious USMC fighting knife. Now this is probably one of the most well-known and easily recognizable knives in knife history right there. As soon as you see it, even people that don't know knives know that that's a USMC fighting knife. We're going to talk about the history here. Now, this knife was adopted by the U.S. Marine Corps in November of 1942. Prior to that, they actually used the Mark I trench knife, which was similar to this, had a similar blade shape. However, it had a brass handguard on it and individual finger holes. So the problem with that was it was heavy, it wasn't easily secured, and the soldiers complained about breaking the blades off a lot because they are very thin. Now, this is going to be a great fighting knife, but at the time, the soldiers wanted something that was multi-purpose, that they could use as a fighting knife, that they could use as a utility tool as well. So they were complaining about this one. They scrapped this one and said, you know what, just scrapping this one is going to save us a lot, because at the time, you got to think, this is right in the throes of World War II. So you got to think, that's going to save, production was very expensive and very difficult. There was a steel shortage at the time. So saving that material from the handle actually saved them a lot. So they scrapped that and moved on. Now, there was kind of a complicated process, but the soldiers knew that they wanted something that they could use as a utility knife as well. And so the USMC fighting knife / utility knife was born. It was not without its complications. The Navy was given a Mark I version. They really didn't like it, but the USMC was given this knife. Now, there's been several companies that have made this under the K-Bar name, including Camillus, Ontario. There's been Wesky has made this knife under the K-Bar name. So a ton of actual production facilities have made this knife under the K-Bar name for the U.S. government. And this one has been in service longer than any other. Now, to this day, you're still going to find this knife across all branches. They've made several different versions, not just the USMC that you see here, and we can show that to you up close right there. But you're also going to find ones that over here on this side of the blade tang, you'll see USMC right there. You're going to find ones with U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, so, you know, U.S. Space Force. So you're going to find a lot of different versions of this. Now, by the time 1943 rolled around, now through the introduction process, it was very complicated, and some Marines ended up going out there with their own personal knives, and there were several, like M77s and stuff like that, that they would take out into the field if that's what they wanted. But by late 1943, this was pretty much standard, and this was being taught for all new recruits as a defensive tool as well. But they actually used this design so that not only it could be used as a fighting knife, but also as a trench tool. This was going to be a good digger. This was going to be great for hand-to-hand combat, but it was also going to be great to use for a survival knife in real-world scenarios when they were out in the field. Now, early on, Marines were often issued those with the USN Mark II name. Again, that was the one that the Navy didn't really care for. They still make that one as a commemorative. You can find that one here in our store. But this was a knife, fighting, and utility knife. So this was the first knife for the military that had several purposes. And every Marine that was armed with an M1911, an M1 carbine, BAR, or crew service machine gun was issued this knife if they wanted it. And so there were a lot of these out in circulation. Now, like I said, a lot of companies ended up making this. Camillus did, Union Cutlery Company, which is actually who originated K-Bar there. Utica Cutlery Company, Canetta Cutlery Company, Camillus, like I said, Ontario Knife Company, Wesky. Around 1945 to 1952, Wesky made these. So there's been a lot of different ones. Now, you might have seen Case's USMC fighting knife. They actually submitted one as a prototype. They didn't actually get the contract on it, but in the early 90s, Case released a modern commemorative version of those prototypes, made the Case USMC fighting knife. Now, you've probably seen that one before. And little trivia, and we'll probably do a history of K-Bar in the future, but does anyone know, in the comments down below, let me know if you know where the name K-Bar comes from. It's actually a really cool story, and we will probably tell that one sometime in the near future. So, this has been a service knife now for 70 years, and is still a mainstay, and that's because this is a phenomenal design. It still holds up to this day. Got a great blade coating now. Throughout some of those years, they did some with a polished blade. What they found was that a lot of the soldiers would actually then take them and coat them or parkerize them, which was the same process that they would do to gun barrels and gun stocks and stuff like that, to take the glare off, because they didn't want any glare on any of the tools that they had. The last thing you wanted was to draw attention to yourself, especially if you were out in the jungle or out in the desert. You didn't want to draw any attention to yourself. So they would parkerize everything that they could and then sharpen up the blade edge, and that way they minimize the chance of any glare coming off of this blade. That's pretty much the history of the USMC fighting knife, and we've got a really cool, really old version right here. We've been talking about restoring this one. It's tough to do that because it's really tough to take it out of its original condition, but we do want to restore this one, and we might end up doing that in the future. Let us know in the comments down below if you want to see that. Folks, as always, it's been me, TC, here with Smoky Mountain Knife Works. And remember, if it cuts like that USMC fighting knife, then we carry it. Shut